Welcome to Don't Quit Your Day Job, a podcast about four guys who have no business thinking anyone will care about what they say. My name's Jeff.
I'm Edison.
I'm RJ.
And I'm Joshua.
Today on the pod, the guys talk favorites. So we're going to go around kind of talking about whether it be music, movies, maybe even video games, just kind of talking about things that we've really enjoyed and kind of our formation as people, and just talk about things that we like, why we like them, kind of make defenses for why we like them the way that they are. And I think we're going to start it off with me. Is that?
Yeah, Edison, look at you.
Okay, well, we're going to start off with music then. For me, really, the formative album that I've really kind of cling to as a favorite of mine is Green Day's American Idiot. Came out in 2004 and was kind of the album that brought the band back from the dead. And it was kind of structured as this kind of like operatic album, kind of in the same vein as like Tommy and Purple Rain. I think what's really good about the album is that it really hits home the kind of political themes, and it really hits home on the story. You really do get a narrative that starts off from top to bottom, and you get these characters like Saint Jimmy, what's her name, the Jesus of Suburbia, and you kind of, as you go along throughout the album, you kind of get this like little neat little story. And for like a kid growing up in 2004, a lot of music tended to not have like that kind of creative output. So it was pretty incredible to see just a band kind of putting something out there like that. That you could enjoy the song individually, but you can ultimately, as a story arc, kind of enjoy where they go and kind of where they end up by the end of the album.
I know for me, like, I don't often get into different music genres and stuff. I tend to stick just to my jazz, and occasionally I'll branch out into pop punk. And that Green Day album, I still remember when I was a kid, like, that was one of the few that I would listen to quite often. And it's like, I do enjoy the aspect of albums telling a story. You don't really get that very much nowadays. You just get like the singles here and there, and there's not really that, like used to when you had records, you would have to listen to the whole thing all the way through, and it would tell a story from start to finish. And I think American Idiot does a good job of that.
There's something nice about the collective feeling of music being put together, and like one song by itself is good, but as they build on top of each other, and you lose that in single albums, newer albums, where every song is its individual piece. That also allows for other things you can do, but I do enjoy the Green Day album and how they did that. I also enjoy a lot of older albums that do that.
Yeah, no. And what's really cool about this one especially is when you got two songs in particular, Jesus Suburbia, which kind of, even within like the structure of, hey, we've got like song after song kind of telling the story, even Jesus Suburbia itself, you've got like 5 little sections to one song, and they're kind of telling this story of this character, but then kind of like going in like really different directions musically within just the same song, and so that's pretty fantastic to see. That was really cool, and you especially get that with Homecoming. You kind of get like a bombastic kind of like beginning. You get a kind of like paranoid, fast-paced rhythm, like straight up like 70s type punk, kind of going into the middle, and then you kind of like almost like a ballad towards the end as they kind of wrap up this the Jesus Suburbia character's arc. Spoiler alert for a music album, but he ends up killing himself towards the end, and you see how Green Day kind of like wraps up nicely, kind of like this character's like progression, and where kind of like the political things they wanted to talk about, and kind of what that character represents to the album. So it was kind of cool to see that kind of, even within like the songs, they would put out these like monster like 12-minute songs that don't have the same kind of like, there's twists and turns to them. There's no like kind of like, okay, it's run its course, where like a song like Stairway to Heaven, it's like, okay, by minute 4, you're kind of like, oh boy, like we get it. It's like Jimmy Page, rocking on the guitar for like 3 minutes straight. But it's definitely something that I personally got a kick out of in regards to the music of the album.
I think you can't necessarily discount the singles on the album either by themselves. There are certain songs on the album that they really hold up well on their own, even if you're not going through the story being told.
Oh no, no, absolutely. I think it's almost the album itself almost seems prophetic. We're looking back 13 years hindsight to American Idiot, but the kind of idea of the concepts of like propaganda and just kind of like simple mindedness and just kind of being blindly told what to think and how to feel, and kind of the media's role in feeding news to people. It's almost as if it was ahead of its time in regards to that. So when American Idiot came out, that was a pretty damning statement, to put out there, and a big fuck you to Middle America and kind of the Bush administration at the time. But I mean, you could take that. That song is applicable 13 years ago as it is today. With the way that you've got like the Trump administration. It's kind of like blurring of the lines, blurring of our media institutions, and kind of like like what does Fox News have in regards to their role in perpetuating media to the people, and same with like a CNN or an MSNBC. So it's really it was the singles kind of very anti-war, anti-authoritarian, and you get that with like American Idiot. You get that with like a Holiday, Wake Me Up When September Ends, and then obviously a couple other songs kind of have like a more personal feel to them. But yeah, no, for sure, the singles definitely kick you in the face, and you kind of go off from there.
So, did you have another album you wanted to talk about, Edison?
Yeah, so the other album that really captured my imagination, uh, growing up as a kid, it's kind of always kind of stayed there as like a kind of like a nostalgia album, kind of the feel good, is Kanye West's college. It's College Dropout, and so I know that we're kind of he kind of gets a bad rap. I mean, he's done some dumb things, but I mean, going into this album, oh boy, that was like it was kind of like his ascension, and kind of like how the hip hop community had essentially deemed him the next great MC, and kind of like the generational type that would kind of take hip hop from the ash heap that was the East Coast West Coast kind of war, and kind of like the aftermath of the deaths of like Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls, um, and kind of take what was left by rappers like Nas and Jay Z, and kind of like they hadn't yet hit like cult status yet, but we're kind of getting there. And kind of Kanye kind of comes in with like the swagger and the bravado, and it was really cool to see, especially if you're a fan of the Chappelle Show. You know that first season is pretty cool because you get to see Kanye before even the album comes out, and he's putting out these songs that are going to really change the landscape of hip hop. And so, when it all comes down, Jesus walks. Those are some pretty heavy themes in regards to the black community, kind of like where hip hop is going, and kind of gives it back a more kind of social conscious in the mainstream hip hop. I think you kind of had that with like MC groups like Wu Tang and a Tribe Called Quest, but mainstream rap, it kind of was like you had Ja Rule, Fat Joe, kind of putting out the you know Cash Money kind of deal, and there wasn't really much of a conscience to it. And then Eminem kind of like blows up, and um, white America kind of like gets all into it, and so we really don't have like a kind of socially conscious rapper for a few years, and so it's really refreshing to kind of see Kanye kind of ascend and put in these themes of like socioeconomic status, race, and kind of bring that to the forefront when it had been put in the burner for like several years.
So are you done? I don't really have many thoughts
Yeah, that
on
was
the
an
Kanye West
exciting
album.
wrap up about that Kanye West album. I'm not a big fan of rap. I don't have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I don't like Kanye, but if you say he's a good guy, Edison, I'll listen to you.
I like that album. I've heard it before, and I'm also guilty pleasure Power. But other than that, I don't listen to a lot of. I listen to a lot of older hip hop mainly because I prefer it, and I feel like it was more political back then and more something I could get in with and understand. But newer hip hop doesn't always do that for me. So
I think with any mainstream kind of music, you kind of get that like not necessarily talking about certain issues in the world, but I think Kanye kind of opens up the door to like Kendrick Lamar, a Chance the Rapper, those kinds of guys, and it really he's kind of like the beginning of that kind of consciousness, that new wave of like hip hop that kind of has really exploded and kind of taken hold in 2017. So you kind of get the different perspective, and especially in this podcast with me.
I'm not going to talk about any hip hop, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out there right now. The only hip hop artist I've gotten into anytime recently was Hopsin, and that was mainly his Ill Mind series, where he talks about his personal conflicts. One of the songs is his personal conflict religion. He talks about the personal conflict with the status quo and pop culture with the hip hop pop culture that surrounds that. And he talks about his beefs that he has with that. It's a really interesting series of songs, and I also like a lot of his other songs. I got into him through Ill Mind of Hopsin 7, and that song launched me into pretty much going through his entire discography and listening to his music. I liked him. That's a recommendation.
I like some of them. Is Little Dicky considered hip hop? If Little Dicky's considered hip hop, I call myself a fan of one hip hop artist, but otherwise I'm gonna pick and choose some Eminem songs and say
I'm on our show. I'm not picking and choosing.
But Little Dicky though, big fan.
You want to go?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it's kind of controversial because it's 12 out of the 13 songs are covers, but I'm gonna go with Michael Bublé's "It's Time." So Home is the only track that he actually wrote on the album, but there are songs he's covered by Stevie Wonder. There was a Sinatra song. There was Nina Simone song. The Beatles. There's actually a Beatles song on the album. I know at least Edison's heard me play this song over and over and over in my car for the past year. So I don't know. It's like I have this affinity for like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, the Rat Pack in general, and Michael Bublé is really the only person alive today that I find that really brings me back to those people.
He definitely has the voice for it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think Frank Sinatra was the only person who ever had like a perfect tone, and Michael Bublé it's still not quite there. Like you're not Sinatra level, but he's
pretty good though.
He's pretty close. So this album, it doesn't tell a story like American Idiot or anything. It doesn't tell a story from song to first song to last song, but basically every song on there just brings me back to, not even back because I wasn't alive when they were alive, but it puts me in the mood of this time that was before I was even born, of the Rat Pack and all of these other people. I don't have like some deep personal reason like Edison as far as like the social implications or anything like that. It's really just, it represents my music taste. It represents people who aren't around anymore. It represents what I'm into. Honestly, it's a perfect culmination. I think it is the fact that he's covering a lot of other artists that I appreciate, and it just kind of brings it together for me.
It's a modern retelling of a culture that you enjoyed. Yeah, Michael Bublé is a great artist. I personally like. He's one of the few people I can actually listen to Christmas songs, mainly just because I grew up listening to Christmas songs like 3 months before Christmas would start, and I got really tired of all of them. But I can still listen to Bublé because his voice is so good.
like how Joshua picked the one not Michael Bublé Christmas album, and we decided to immediately jump into Michael Bublé's Christmas album.
I'm
because
okay.
I'm sorry, hasn't done anything else. I don't care if you just said he did something else. He's only done Christmas albums.
He has like 5 or 6 albums, a lot of which are actually original albums instead of just the cover album that I mentioned.
I can't hear you. Christmas songs? Is that what you said?
Oh my god.
What's my favorite song by Michael Bublé? I Just Haven't Met You Yet.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I like that song. I forgot that's Bublé.
That's actually an album.
As kind of like we were talking earlier, about lack of understanding.
The social political
Yeah.
climate again.
No, not even that. I just
I just felt it.
As far as like my views on Kanye, you're like the same, like you're not getting it.
not necessarily getting it. I just think it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But
You're all wrong. They're
kinda
both
want-
great, and you should love them both and listen to
No,
them both. At the same time.
no. I could get that. Like, I just thought it was like funny. Like, I could just mention, like, yeah, the same way, like, maybe nobody here has an opinion on Kanye. I have no opinion on Michael Bublé, but his Twitter game and his Instagram game is pretty strong.
On the bright side, it's pretty clear he's one of the few nice individuals left in the world.
That we know
until next
For
week
now.
when it drops.
of, right?
So that's really all I had. So we can move on to Jeff now.
I'm terrible picking favorites. I listen to way too many genres of music and to way too many different artists to pick favorites. I'm actually just terrible at favorites in general. This is entirely an excuse. But yeah, I'm just gonna spitball some albums out there. My first one that I really enjoy, because I really enjoy reading books, even though I don't get around to it a lot recently, is Every Trick in the Book by Ice Nine Kills. This is a heavier album for those of you who fear the metal. But Every Trick in the Book is really interesting because you guys were talking about how Green Day told a story with their whole album. What I like about Every Trick in the Book is every one of the songs is pretty much, I'd say, a remake of a book, a very popular book. For instance, there is The People in the Attic, which is the Diary of Anne Frank, made into song. They have Star-Crossed Enemies, which is Romeo and Juliet, retold through song, of Bloodbath and Beyond, which is the story of Dracula, Communion of the Curse, which is the Exorcist, and it's just, they have a very stagey feel. The album very much feels like a play, the way they introduce orchestraic and metal and guitar into it, and it just blends so well. It feels like a presentation. It feels like something you'd see in a theater, because that's just the way they introduce it. And I've always liked theatrical music that feels like the music itself gives feelings and tells a story of its own along with the words that are in it. And I've always just been a big fan of that. I don't think anybody here has heard the album besides me. I forced my girlfriend to listen to it, but nobody else here is going to be able to comment on that. But it's a really good album, and I think Edison should listen to it, and Josh could try. I don't think he'd get very far, but yeah.
Oh, I don't get an honorable mention.
Do you want to? I kind of forget you're here because you don't talk a lot. You can try it if you want to.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, no, I didn't think you were going. Actually, it's not true. You'd like Star-Crossed Enemies. You'd like Star-Crossed Enemies because there's literally.
Because it says stars in the name. And...
No, it's because it's not heavy at all.
Oh, okay. I can deal with it.
I think Jeff knew that you didn't want any part of it. That's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
he didn't mention you.
I am aware of why he didn't.
I told Josh
But
you
I
could
still
try
wanted
it,
to
even
beat
though I
it.
knew he wouldn't. Another, I can't say this is a very one of my favorite albums, but it's something I'm very into right now, and it could become one of my favorite albums. It just came out in August of this year. Is Dead Weight by Wage War, another heavy album. Basically, I just love the Johnny Cash song on it. It's called Johnny Cash, and it's a beautiful love song. There are several beautiful love songs on it for anybody who likes metalcore. Another one is from Under the Cork Tree from 2005 by Fall Out Boy. Literally a perfect album. Every song on it is amazing. If you haven't heard it, listen to it. It's better than any new Fall Out Boy ever. Just saying, there's not an opinion on that. It's the best Fall Out Boy. And my final one is the self-titled album by Nothing More. This song, the songs on it are all amazing. There's a song called Christ on Copyright, which is basically a song about politicians using religion to sell ideas to people who wouldn't normally take it, but because it's given to them in the gift wrapper of Jesus, people accept it. They're a very Christian band, and they very much believe in their they believe in the Bible a lot, and it just comes up in a lot of their songs. And as much as I'm not very religious, I enjoy the way they embrace their religion and the openness they have to different ideas, and it's a very good song for that. Another song on that album is great is Jenny, which is about there's just the lead singer's sister, but it also several other band members have had the same situation in their life. Jenny is the hypothetical sister that has a drug abuse problems and coalescing with his mother being sick and trying to stay alive basically to take care of her, even though Jenny isn't letting anybody take care of her. It's a very powerful story. God Went North is not from that album, but it's the story of the mom. Just there's a lot of powerful music on that album, and it's very touching. I've always enjoyed touching music, theatrical music, basically anything that can provoke a lot of emotion from me, which is the point of music, but to a degree, I like very strong emotional music. Just Nothing More by Nothing More is a great album, and I enjoy it greatly. But no big time.
Kind of going back to what you were saying. So we're talking about like a lot of these bands that you like and you listen to, and what's really cool is that the advent of the internet kind of like allows for like a lot of these bands to kind of like put their music out there in an era where maybe say 17 years ago they would need to have gone through the avenues of like traditional like record labels. In particular, you mentioned kind of Under the Cork Tree by Fall Out Boy. It was kind of like that album that kind of put them out there as like, hey, we exist, we're out there,
We're amazing.
We're amazing, yeah. So do you ever worry that because of the way that like everything can be so niche in music now because of the internet and it's kind of like putting things out through streaming that we won't necessarily get to experience like another Fall Out Boy in the sense that, by going through like those like traditional avenues of like the record label, they were kind of able to kind of put it out on like a mainstream audience that maybe necessarily didn't know about them before.
I think the way marketing works these days and the way businesses have gotten into the mix and made it, I think that the only things that, not necessarily everything that becomes mainstream, but a lot of the things that are tried to put out into the mainstream, whether or not they become successful or not, are kind of watered down and more a general audience because that's what labels want. They want to be able to sell it to as many people as possible. I really like the niche thing of the internet and the ability for people to make the music they like and to release it, because as much as it doesn't reach a wider audience, I enjoy a lot of it. Even if, like, I listen to the music that Josh listens to, I listen to a lot of hip hop, a lot of older hip hop, none of the newer stuff I haven't tried to get into it yet. I listen to metalcore, pop punk, punk rock. I've been listening to jazz recently. The whole entire music album for the Monsters Inc. movie is fantastic, and it's amazing jazz. Yeah, I listen. There's just so many different genres, and I feel like a lot of these musicians, these bands, wouldn't be able to get their foot in the door if it wasn't for the advent of the internet. And I feel, especially things like Spotify, even though I've vaguely heard of Spotify's money practices not paying out very well, but Spotify allows people to listen to them. Just music outlets like that allow people to hear different types of music they wouldn't generally find. Like, I don't think I would have ever heard or found the Pokes if it wasn't without Spotify. The Pokes.
I mean, you would have heard of them at least from
Dr.
Howard Halaby, the wonderful Middle Eastern professor who has an affinity for Irish punk. Surprisingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was Jeff. I guess we can move on to RJ.
I feel like I'm following someone I can never hope to live up to because I like music. I don't love music. It's okay. I got into music a couple years ago, so I don't have anything like formative like Edison all the way back to 2004 and like a bunch of fond memories from his childhood. So I'm just gonna go with something that has a lot of emotional value to me, and that's 52nd Street by Billy Joel. Billy Joel is one of my favorite artists, and all of his songs are just fantastic and speak to me on an emotional level, and have some memories I don't care to discuss with everybody in this room. That or actually, I don't want so much country, but American Four, The Man Comes Around by Johnny Cash. It's a quality depression album. If you're ever in a bad mood and just need to cry for a little bit, perfect album for you to do that.
And talk about an album that just really gut punches you. Is a Johnny Cash that fourth volume, man. Man Comes Around, Personal Jesus.
Hurt's the one that always gets me.
Man,
I can't believe that. I know the song Hurt, but every time somebody says that, I think of Nine Inch Nails, and I know that's not what they're talking about.
I don't know. There's a song that like somebody.
Johnny Cash is probably one of those other artists that just hits me so emotionally every time I listen to him. And I've been binging that a little bit recently just because of Wages of War mentioning them.
But yeah, no, just kind of talking back about like you're kind of like talking about how you think of Hurt, you think of Johnny Cash. I'm not Johnny Cash, but Nine Inch Nails. I guess my point was, man, if there was ever a guy that like straight up stole a song from like a different band in the sense that like this is now mine. As much as you made it and you wrote it and you put it to life, it's my song now. That is it. Johnny Cash, man, when that song plays, I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he did it. It's just it's kind of like a beat up dog.
I know.
It's so sad, but it's so beautiful at the same time. And yet, yeah, I don't know. It's just there's something to.
I mean, Edison's not advocating to go beat the shit out of your dogs.
I'm just trying like.
He's just saying there's like something strong about it, just seeing a dog that's been through actual hell and then still like is a dog.
Puppy.
Yeah, and man, that video, he kind of just you feel bad for him because it almost looks like as though he has several regrets, going through in life, but.
All of his songs make me feel regretful. Like, I don't even have that many. I'm not a regretful person, but every time I listen to Johnny Cash, it makes me think of this thing, and then I feel regret about it. And then the songs are like, wait, why was I feeling bad about that?
Yeah, no, Johnny Cash. Whew. Especially that one. No, that's a testament to the man.
The man physically embodies depression. Like, if we could, like, amalgamate depression into a person, that's
I'd
Johnny
like to
Cash.
make a claim that,
if music could be an item, that album is a Xanax pill.
I think it says a lot about RJ that's his favorite album.
Elliott Smith is probably the embodiment of depression, but Johnny Cash is also the embodiment of depression. They can both be it. You know what? I'm not going to argue that he's not. But at least Elliott Smith is definitely up there too, and just making you regret everything.
Oh yeah, Morrissey. Whew. That's some. The Smiths. To talk about sadness. Same with Death Cab for Cutie.
Death Cab for Cutie is beautiful though. I know the songs are sad, but every time I listen to them, I'm just getting happy because the music is so well done.
It's like this strange. There's this.
Heartbeat in Quiet Rooms is beautiful.
Oh man, Death of an Interior Decorator is like.
I also love the titles, pop punk titles, and titles of that like the punkiest genre. Just are great.
Let me tell you something. If there was a song that could make you simultaneously both hopeful and just broken inside, that song is that. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, kind of like how music can kind of put these different feelings and emotions, especially ones that were like our favorites, and kind of get you to where you need to go. In terms of like emotion, whenever you're in a certain kind of predicament in life. So it's always nice to kind of have those favorites to like look back on fondly.
Actually, one more throw, and I'm not going to talk about it much. I'm just going to mention it.
Okay, well, Jeff, while you make noises, I'll talk about something for a second. Not to make everybody think like Billy Joel or Johnny Cash are my favorite artists. That's David Bowie. And if we want to talk about David Bowie as like writing his own eulogy in the form of Black Star and how incredible that was,
Oh,
we could do that for a minute because I think of Black Star and I almost cry every time I like listen to like Lazarus.
I feel like we could just talk about that all. That would be the podcast if we started talking about that.
Lazarus. Oh man, actually, we're gonna do this now. We're kind of like, especially with our favorites. If there's an album that kind of like brings me back to like in terms of like embodiments of stuff, man. The White Stripes, White Blood Cells. Like if you could picture like being a 7-year-old again, that's what White Blood Cells is. I mean, I can tell that we are going to be friends. Is just it is so pure of a song, and what's really great about like a lot of those is like it's about like schoolgirl, school crushes, kind of just trying to figure yourself out, and that's an album that if you get the chance, give it a shot for sure.
That's what I was going to say about Unimagined by Hanslick Houses. I remember them because I'm wearing the shirt right now. Yeah, that's another album with a bit of a social political view in it, but the music itself is beautiful, and I don't particularly want to go into the social politicalness of it. So I'm just going to say all the songs in it are beautiful. If you haven't heard of Hands Like Houses, listen to Unimagined, and you will love Hands Like Houses. I don't care what genre you're into, you will most likely love it.
All right, so I think everybody's probably got a pretty good idea of our music tastes, how that kind of influences our lives and things and views and things like that. So maybe we can move into movies, do the same thing with movies. So Edison, do you want to go first again?
Yeah, if we're gonna talk about like favorite movies, that just kind of like one for me that just kind of always sticks out in my head is Juno. That was like talk about the right movie, the right person at the right time. It really captures kind of like the angstiness of being a teenager, and it's kind of like wow, taking a person's taking a teenager's problems very seriously. I think with a lot of these movies, we kind of see the kind of silliness of it, and kind of like how maybe not as huge of a problem. Maybe teenagers may not necessarily have it when they're going through their daily lives. But Juno is kind of one of those like movies that you kind of harken back to, like Pretty in Pink, The Breakfast Club, as like really having a well written character, and to have an actress like Ellen Page to kind of take that angst, the anxiety, the trying to figure yourself out aspects of growing up, and just put that on the screen so well performed. And Jason Reitman, whose dad was the director of Ghostbusters 2, Ivan Reitman, he kind of has a really good understanding of like dialogue and people, and so while maybe there are characters in that movie that feel eccentric, you get that little cameo from Rainn Wilson as the clerk at the little convenience store. It feels like a real convenience store clerk, like that's somebody that in your own neighborhood that just give you crap, and the friends feel authentic. The relationships between Juno and her parents are well written, so that was always a favorite of mine, kind of going back in terms of films.
I don't think anyone here is going to argue with you that Juno isn't a fantastic movie.
I'm going to make a sinful admission here. I've never seen Juno, but I just added it to a list, and I'm probably going to watch it instead of going to sleep now.
Well, I mean, I have it on DVD, so if you want to watch it, then
I have many ways to watch Juno.
It's been years since I've seen Juno, so if you want to go home after this, we can pop it in, buddy.
I think I'm going to make Beck watch it with me.
And then, well, if we're talking about favorites again, also in terms of movies, another one just kind of like, I'm sure we'll get to it later in a podcast, but The Dark Knight, talk about a movie that lived up to the hype. Heath Ledger is the OG probably
Ledger's always the OG.
he is, right? And probably like up there with Hannibal Lecter and Darth Vader in terms of like cinematic villains. It's just,
Well-
I mean, there's some plot holes in that film. It's not a perfect film by any stretch, especially as we're going.
But if we're going by acting
10
and filling
years.
the roles, Heath Ledger
Yeah.
did a fantastic job of representing the Joker.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I've forever tattooed Heath Ledger on my rib cage.
Yeah.
So I feel like that movie it really represents my childhood. It represents everything that I was interested in as a child. It was like I've moved on to slightly more mature pop culture things now, but all through my childhood, that's really.
Smart.
It was the Joker. That was the one character that I cared for. And it wasn't just like any Joker. It was either Mark Hamill or it was Heath Ledger. And I've probably seen that movie 40 times or upwards. And I know you've
That's
seen
a
it
lot.
just as many.
Yeah. Oh man, that opening scene, that homage to Heat, so good. Just kind of probably the best. I think I can make the argument that's probably the best opening scene in a film I've seen. Just the clowns kind of like offer themselves one by one, and then just kind of like it's kind of casual how they just introduce like you introduce the Joker and not necessarily having to do all this exposition about who he is. Kind of like as they're going along, killing themselves. You're kind of like, oh, who's the Joker? And it's like, oh, he's a guy, war paint, and kind of get like that little mini introduction without necessarily having to do the obligatory like origin for him, like every other superhero movie tends to do these days, where it's like gotta have the obligatory like, here's who I am.
You gotta have an
Here's
entire
where-
movie to describe your origin story, basically.
Exactly. So it's kind of like we have this little quick thing to introduce them, and they kind of just put them out there and
I mean,
let them loose.
you'll go to Comic-Con or something and you'll see people cosplaying just as bank robber Joker. Like it's a 5 to 10 minute scene, but they'll take that 5 to 10 minute scene and they'll put all this effort into it because it was so influential and it was so different than anything else that's been done.
Yeah, although that Bale Batman voice, not aged in 10 years.
I don't know if aged is the word we should use. It was pretty dumb the moment it came out of his mouth. So,
But it was beautiful in how much it got memed.
Yeah. What about you, Jeff? What's a favorite movie of yours that you kind of?
I'm gonna make an
Skip it
admission.
up.
I'm gonna make an admission right now. I'm a slut for satire movies. Clue, a satire of the murder mystery. Princess Bride. Blazing Saddles. Pretty much anything Mel Brooks put his hands on. I just love all of them without a doubt. I'd probably say favorite movie of all time is either Young Frankenstein or, we'll just go with Young Frankenstein unless something else comes up.
I'm deeply offended that you just listed a bunch of satire films and didn't say Spaceballs. What is wrong
Sorry,
with
I
you?
said anything Mel Brooks put his hands on.
Yeah, it deserves its own
Okay,
honorable
Spaceballs.
mention. I
Spaceballs
hope the
is there too.
Schwartz just forgets about you. I hope somebody hits you with their ring.
See, I like Young Frankenstein because Gene Wilder's in it, and he's an amazing Frankenstein.
Not to be anal tainted like RJ over here, but for the folks watching at home before they rip us a new one, yes, we do know that Rob Reiner wrote The Princess Bride and not Mel Brooks.
Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't saying that. That was its other side note. I was just saying that so I didn't have to list off every movie Mel Brooks has written.
Well,
Yeah, no, I'm gonna take the hard stance right now. Mel Brooks wrote The Princess Bride. We're saying it happened. He stole it from him.
It's not his style. It's not quite gross enough to be Mel Brooks, but Mel Brooks is great. Spaceballs. Oh, no, wait. I freaking forgot the trilogy. Hot Fuzz, The World's End.
Shaun of the Dead and
Shaun-
The World's End.
Yeah, The World's End and Shaun of the Dead. That amazing trilogy by the actors I can't think of. But
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg,
and I
thank you.
forget the chubby one's name.
Simon Pegg's the only important one. Simon Pegg didn't. Actually, that's not true. They were all amazing. But Simon Pegg, whoa, there's a reason he's beloved everywhere.
yeah, Edgar Wright is kind of
Yeah, that's the name I was looking for.
has really taken off in terms of like Past the satire stuff, it's kind of like with Baby Driver. It's like an homage to kind of like the racing film, kind of like of the '70s, and now he's kind of like his stock is kind of risen in Hollywood. So it'll be interesting to see like whether he continues kind of like the satire route or if he kind of decides to make his serious film.
I think he's leaning towards more. I remember reading something else. He's leaning towards more serious films for not permanently, but like his upcoming films are something he wanted to take a stab at that he had been working on for a while.
RJ.
Well, movies are kind of my home here. I still don't want to bore everybody with it, but if we're gonna go with like most meaningful and most emotional movie for me, that's gonna be something a lot of people will disagree with. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, well, a lot of people don't necessarily think it's like people think it's special, but it's not like fucking the best movie. For me, it's a movie that kind of got me out of my shell. I was shy back in 2014, and I still remember when that movie came out. It kind of like, as I think the best way to put it is the way James Gunn did afterwards, is that he made this movie as a movie for outcasts, people who were ashamed of who they were, and like to give them a ray of hope that they're okay and they can find people like them and they can interact and be humans. And I think that what he was trying to channel in that and give like the little guy,
Underdog,
little guy hope and like that he will be a person was kind of beautiful, and I just enjoy James Gunn as a human being, and that movie will always hold a special place in my heart. As for just best made movie, I guess Pulp Fiction, or anything Tarantino's ever put his fucking hands on, including Four Rooms. That scene from Four Rooms that was directed by Tarantino was amazing.
Man, Tarantino is Pulp Fiction is kind of like that film that you know that you can always kind of go back to and just quote. It's so quotable.
I remember the first time I watched that was on a plane. The first time I got on a plane, which was actually more recently than I'd like to admit, even though I attempted to watch it before. I watched it on a plane ride over to London, and that was a great plane ride because of that movie.
It'll be interesting to see how kind of like younger generations kind of look back on like films like Pulp Fiction and whether they can relate to it as well as we have, and obviously like Generation X kind of like that's their film, that's their movie, kind of like fills all the hallmarks of like kind of like the humor, the ultra violence, and its quotability for sure.
It's quintessential Tarantino. Like if there's ever a movie you need to use to describe Tarantino as a person, it's Pulp Fiction.
Did Josh go?
No, I haven't actually. So I have a couple. The first one I'm going to guess nobody else in this room has seen, and the second one I'm not proud of, but we're going to do it anyways. So I was at Walmart one time, and I was looking in the $3 movie bin, and a movie had Frank Sinatra on the cover, so of course you heard my music interest. I was interested, and amazingly, he doesn't even sing in this movie. But it's called The Man with the Golden Arm. It was made in 1955. It's a black and white movie, and spoiler alert, it's a little you've had time. So it's basically the story of Frank is like this recovering drug addict coming home from rehab, and he's coming back into town, and he's trying to become a musician. He learned how to play the drums while he was in rehab, and he's kind of taken this road. And his wife is in a wheelchair when he comes back home. His wife is in a wheelchair, and he thinks that he needs to take care of her and all this other stuff. So he goes through this journey, and eventually he ends up dealing cards for this bookie type character played by Dean Martin. And eventually he ends up addicted to crack again. And you got to think this was in 1955, and it was kind of controversial at the time. They didn't even want to release it in theaters, but eventually they did get it through. And so it was basically the first time people in America saw something like this on a big screen. Like, well, we see TV shows now constantly where something like that's portrayed, but it was kind of like a shock factor back in the day. And in the end of the movie, Frank finds out that his wife was lying and she doesn't need the wheelchair, and she was just doing this so he would stay with her. So it's basically just like shock after shock, and you see Frank portrays a drug dealer. Like, I think it would be comparable to any amazing performance of someone who's done the same thing since then. I mean, this was the movie that he won an Oscar for a different movie, but this was the movie that he thought, and a lot of other people thought that he deserved an Oscar for. Has anyone else seen this movie by chance?
I was in the room when my dad watched it. I didn't pay much attention because I was 5 years old and black and white movies seems boring.
I think the farthest back I could go in terms of films is Psycho. I think it's like 1960.
I've seen Nosferatu, so I can go all the way back to the 30s or 40s, whenever that was made.
All right, well, my second choice, which I said I wasn't proud of, is Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny.
Don't feel ashamed, man. That movie is a fucking trip.
I realized that the movie is not at all like a quality film. It shouldn't win awards or anything, but it's just like from start to finish, I enjoy that movie. I don't know what it is. It's not like a deep emotional connection. I do love like parody music from time to time, and I love Jack Black's voice specifically, and I think he and Kyle Gass just work so well together, and they really portrayed that on screen in a way. It's like, how can you take a band and make a movie about it? And although it didn't get good critical reception, because it's like I said,
critics are dumb.
Yeah, critics are dumb.
Yeah, critics are dumb.
Like, I'm still waiting for the sequel, Tenacious D and the Bong of Destiny, but
is that what
the devil's horn falls off at the end, and they turn it into a bong.
Actually, speaking of that reminded me. Were you done?
Yeah.
Okay. That reminded me of Kung Pao, if anybody's seen that movie.
Oh, my goodness. Talk about
a trip.
Parody film. Talk about parody film.
That is another amazing movie. I will fight anybody who says that movie's not fantastic.
It's pretty good satire in terms of, like, making fun of, like, Enter the Dragon and a lot of those kung fu films from, like, the mid-'60s and early 70s.
I'm going to summarize this movie without actually giving away any of the plot. Imagine if a nowadays actor who looks pretty and wanted to go make a movie got on his own, found a old, I want to say open source, it's not the right word, what's a public access movie from like the 60s or 70s, a Japanese kung fu movie, took that, redubbed over it badly on purpose, and then edited him and a few other characters into the movie and made a whole new story around it. And just imagine that, because that's what the movie is, and it's amazing.
I guess for the tastemakers out there, I'll throw out one that's a little more of like an indie darling, I suppose. But Pan's Labyrinth is I can go down saying that it's one of the 10 movies that I think a person needs to see in their life. It's a wonderfully constructed, but incredibly morbid kind of take on the fairy tale, and it's set in the Spanish Civil War. Francisco Franco has taken over Spain, and it's this. The premise is that it's this little girl who her mother is married to one of the lieutenants of the Black Flags during the height of the Spanish Civil War, and so in the middle of like kind of like this, modern retelling of like the events that happened there, this little girl is kind of like off on her own and meets up with this fawn, and it, declares that, she's really not these people's parents, and that her real parents are this magical king and queen, and that they have these tasks to do she has these tasks to do in order to be reunited with them. And what you kind of get is this really beautifully constructed film about loss, about death, about life, childhood, and things like that. And it's I won't spoil the ending. I think it's quite beautiful in certain aspects, and it's such a beautifully constructed film. And Guillermo del Toro. We'll see what happens with The Shape of Water, which comes out later this year. But I truly believe it's kind of like his. That's the film that if you want to get an understanding of who he is as a filmmaker, Pan's Labyrinth is that movie.
I remember seeing that, and that movie had the same amount of, I don't want to quite say wonderment, but wonderment is the word I'm going to use. Had the same amount of wonderment and the same kind of feeling that I got when I was watching the original. When I read Alice in Wonderland, it kind of had the same feeling and some of the same kind of ideas and lessons in the same way of telling the story, and I enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed reading Alice in Wonderland.
Absolutely, I think the kind of the surrealism and the kind of almost like, I wouldn't necessarily say psychedelic, but just kind of like the atmosphere that's kind of like, it's kind of like a dreadful kind of, you're not necessarily sure this girl is completely safe throughout the whole journey, and you see that as she kind of progresses throughout this quest and throughout these different tasks that she's doing.
And I lost it.
So, not to undercut the beauty of Pan's Labyrinth, because it is a fantastic film, but has anyone here seen Stoker? Stoker. It is, it's a little bit more obscure than Pan's Labyrinth, as you can tell. It is essentially a coming-of-age story, but for a serial killer. Like a teenager finding out that they are a serial killer and going through that.
Huh.
All right, guys. Well, I think we've pretty much discussed everything we wanted to today. We've given you some insight on our taste for music, our taste for movies. So unless anybody else has something to say, I guess we're going to wrap it up.
One last thing. If you get the chance, watch the movie, I think it's called Breaking Glass. It's essentially it's Hayden Christensen's movie. I think if the guy got a bad break in Hollywood, especially after Star Wars. But essentially, it's about a guy who this is kind of like the height of the internet, kind of like as it's like kind of becoming mainstream. But he writes for, I believe it was Vanity Fair, and he essentially bullshitted a bunch of like articles that he wrote about like hacker conventions and stuff like that. And it's almost kind of like this thriller in the sense that you're kind of rooting for him to like lie his ass out of the situation. And so it's kind of like it didn't get as much love back in the day. I think it's got rewatchability that's pretty high, and I think if a lot more people watched it, I think Hayden Christensen would get a lot more love these days. So I'm gonna let you end it on that.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.